Hey guys, it's Phoebe and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be reacting to more scary animations. And in honor of the new year, we're going to be watching True New Year's Eve Horror Stories by SSG Animations. As always, link down below.
I hate New Year's parties. I know what you're thinking. What kind of freak doesn't like to celebrate the new year, right? Well, after what I experienced at one of the New Year's parties, I feel that my hatred, or should I say fear, is quite justified. It all happened a few years ago on December 31st. The clock was ticking down to the last minute of the year, and I was alone in my house. I had decided to stay home that night. I didn't feel much like dealing with the holiday crowd, so I opted for a quiet night at home. I turned on the TV to watch the New Year's special, but my thoughts were interrupted by a subtle sound coming from outside my house. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just the wind playing with the blinds. However, the sound persisted, becoming more distinct. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. I walked to the front door and carefully opened it. The streets were dark. I saw nothing out of the ordinary, but the sound of footsteps continued.
Why is that bear? I don't even know what animal that could be, but that is not human. Unless they had a fight with a lawnmower and haven't seen nail clippers in their entire life. What is that? Some kind of skinwalker disguised as your little old grandmother here to give you a 20?
Continued. Closer now. I decided to step out onto the sidewalk, my heart pounding in my chest. As I peeked out, I saw a dark figure moving toward me. My legs trembled, but I forced myself to keep my composure.
I bit my lip as the dear lady walked up to me. What is he doing?
I couldn't make out the figure's features, only an elongated shadow slowly approaching me. I know that at that moment I should have run as fast as I could. That I should have escaped into my...
Imagine you're just taking a midnight stroll on your own, minding your own business, and you see some guy stepping out of his house staring at you and going, like, yeah, I didn't wear makeup one night, and now this guy is terrified of me. That poor deer lady thing. How does the deer lady thing be feeling?
House and hid. I don't know if it was something paranormal or not that held me in place, but the figure was approaching me quickly, and I couldn't run. I just couldn't. It was as if I was paralyzed. I needed to know what I was seeing. A few steps later, the figure came a little closer to the point where I could recognize her. It was my girlfriend. Honey, what are you doing here? Weren't you with your parents? Something was wrong. Whatever was approaching me looked exactly like my girlfriend, but it wasn't. There was no way it was my girlfriend. A few minutes before, she had sent me a picture of her in another state. This one that was approaching me looked exactly the same, but at the same time, there was something absolutely macabre in the way she walked. Her steps, her body movement, her body, it just wasn't natural. It was as if she was trying to walk like a human. It was as if she was trying to imitate a human. In those few seconds, when I saw that being with the face of my girlfriend walking slowly towards me, all trace of curiosity was erased from me. At that moment, I was no longer paralyzed, and I knew I had to run as soon as possible. Whatever it was, it radiated a terrifying energy. I knew that it wasn't good, and although I didn't know what it would do to me if it reached me, I knew it was sure to be inexplicably horrible.
This guy is talking too much. I would have ran the first second I saw somebody in the street. He's standing there examining her, going through flashbacks of his girlfriend's body, and then comparing it to this skinwalker-ass lady. You could have run by now.
I ran desperately to my front door and locked it. I took a few steps backward and fell on the floor, sitting. Before I had time to get up, I heard a noise at my front door. Someone was knocking slowly but forcefully on the door.
That doesn't sound very slow. It sounds like... What? Where can I slam my foot? Can you... But it sounded like that. If that's his definition of slow, no wonder his girlfriend can't walk properly.
Each knock was delicate, but loud. They were all perfectly timed as if they were automatic. I thought about approaching the crack in the door, but there was no need. I knew who it was. I was in absolute panic. I didn't know where to run or what to do. Should I run away from the house? Hide? I could get caught if I ran away, but if I hid, maybe it wouldn't find me. Suddenly, the pounding on the door stopped, halting my train of thought. I didn't know what I had to do to escape this being that was stalking me, but I knew my next step. I began to close all the windows one by one. This thing could enter through the windows and attack me, or maybe it would just leave me alone if it didn't see me. Full of energy again,
Maybe it'll leave me alone if it didn't see me. Proceeds to stand by a window, staring out of a said window.
Got up and started running, closing every shutter in the house, knowing I couldn't waste a second. Ah! I couldn't believe what was happening. How had the window opened?
Oh.
It could only open from this side.
Oh.
The strange being began to slowly approach me, but something had changed in its form. It was no longer the same as my girlfriend. Now its face seemed to be melting and changing with every second that passed. Now she looked like something different, something that at first sight was not human. Once I had it in front of me, the being grabbed my face. Its hands were absolutely freezing. Although they still resembled my girlfriend's hands, their hands were rough and felt like they were cutting into my face as they squeezed it. With a neutral face, as if it didn't know how to change facial expressions, the being opened its eyes wide and let out a scream that made me freeze with fear. Filled with adrenaline from the scream, I tried to resist and fight the terrifying being, but it was pointless. Its arms looked small and fragile like my girlfriend's, but the force it was applying on my body was uncontrollable. There was nothing I could do to get out of it. Aware that I was surrendering,
I was going to say kick it in the balls, but it doesn't have any. So, I don't know, tickle its tongue. How do you get out? Wait, you just poke it in the eyes if you can reach. Poke it in the eyeballs.
The monster grabbed my face and began to squeeze it. At that moment, I felt an unimaginable pain that I cannot explain. It was as if my skull was receiving an unbearable amount of pressure, as if it was going to break at any second. It felt like the monster's fingers were going to destroy my head and pierce my brain with its long, terrifying nails that were beginning to show through my girlfriend's fake body. When I was ready to die, a horrible and painful death, something unexpected saved my life. My cell phone. My cell phone was ringing. At the sound of the cell phone, the monster came out from above me and ran towards the source of the sound, brutally beating it to destruction. I tried to get up to escape, but the pain in my head was just too much. It may not have destroyed my skull, but I was sure I had a fracture. A few seconds more and it would have split my head open like a flower. As the monster continued to destroy the remains of the cell phone, I crawled with difficulty, and with even more effort, I got up to climb out of the window and crawl down the street. The clock had already struck 12, so families had already begun to take to the streets and set off fireworks. Among those families was my neighbor's family, who saw me crawling down the street and came to my rescue. Once the ambulance and the police arrived, they told me that my house was empty, but that the damage was real. When I left the hospital, they told me that the reason I felt so bad wasn't just because of the head injury, but because of the shock that I had experienced. And they couldn't figure out what was the cause of it. Obviously, I didn't tell them what I had experienced, but I told them that my house had been broken into. Even so, the doctors had a hard time believing me.
Why don't tell the truth? Why no? Tell truth, maybe help. Doctor, help. No. No.
As they told me that no human could have the strength to do what they had done to my head. After returning to my home, I confirmed that it was really empty. I was afraid that this being would come back to finish what he started.
Why is this man constantly biting his lip? It looks like he's constantly turned on about something. What is this man's problem?
Something told me he would not. Call it a hunch. Call it a delusion. But luckily, I was right. Over time, I did a lot of research on what attacked me. From what I read on the internet, they are called skinwalkers, and they can impersonate humans and animals without difficulty. I didn't know how that being recognized my girlfriend's face and body to attack me, but that made me more afraid since it might have been watching me for some time. Refusing to be the prey of this monster again, I moved a few months later with my girlfriend and never heard from it again. There are a few nights that I don't dream of this monster, and every time we're at a New Year's Eve party, I try never to spend it alone. I don't know what will become of this beast's life, but I fear that one day, when I least expect it, I will fall prey to him again. And this time, I don't know if I will be lucky enough to escape.
I'm going to end it there because he doesn't stop talking. The next story we're going to be reacting to is True Homeless Horror Stories by IMR Scary Tales.
How do you feel when you walk alone at night? Are you overly cautious? Do you walk in fear, looking back every few seconds thinking that something will happen to you at any moment?
No, I just do not walk at night. See, smartest option. So that something like this cannot happen to me.
Or are you one of those people who feel safe and think that dangerous things only happen to a few people who make the news? My name is Jake, and I used to be one of those people. I mean, I'm a man, I'm an adult, and I'm over 6 feet tall. I'm the kind of guy you wouldn't want to pick a fight with. But that night, none of that mattered. That night, I realized that no matter who you are, if you're looking for misfortune, it'll find you. I used to work at night at a boring office job that is not even worth mentioning. When it was time to go home, I had to rush to the station to catch the last train. If I didn't catch it, I had to walk several blocks in the dark. To be honest, I chose this schedule because I was paid for night hours. I never thought I would be in danger just walking at night. At worst, I'd run. And that's exactly what happened the night it all happened. It was a Tuesday night. This was known to be the dullest and least busy day of the week, but this Tuesday was an exception. My department was the only one that had received extra work, and to make it worse, I was the one who had to make sure everything was in order and close the office. When I left, the few remaining colleagues and I went our separate ways. Everyone had a car except me, but since we lived so far away from each other, no one could give me a ride. I knew I would surely not make the train, but I still thought I might get lucky, so I hurried and ran. When I arrived at the station, I noticed that the ticket seller was not there, which didn't surprise me. Almost nobody pays for a train ticket, and the entrances are open at this hour. Agitated, I checked the electronic signs to see when the train would arrive, but as usual, they weren't working either. I could only wait on the platform and see if the train would show up in the next few minutes. I sat low, illuminated by the dim moonlight, waiting for the train. I didn't think it would arrive. Normally, a few people would have already come to wait for it with me. I looked across the station, just to confirm that no one was coming. But to my surprise, I saw a silhouette in the distance. Another person was coming. I remember thinking that maybe the train was just delayed, but it was coming. But with each step the other person took, I began to notice something strange.
A homeless bedsheet ghost. With alien hands. You know what? If I saw this in the middle of the night, I would be scared too. You know what? I was gonna say something cool like there's nothing scary about that. But if an alien bedsheet ghost came to you in the middle of the night, you would be scared too.
Admittedly, I couldn't see far away without my glasses, but there was something about the silhouette that didn't fit. What? When I could see what was ahead of me, I swear my blood froze. That wasn't a man like me coming back from work. He was a man with a sheet covering half of his body. The sheets were dirty, and his pants looked like they were torn. Was he homeless? As I analyzed him, I noticed something else, and maybe this was what I must have seen from the beginning. Although it was only about 2 meters away, the man was not walking in the direction of the end of the train station. He was walking in the direction of me. At that moment, I thought for sure he was paranoid, that this could not be more than a coincidence. But I didn't want to take any risks. I grabbed my backpack from the seat and headed towards the other exit of the train. Even if it took longer, I was determined to go by bus. Once I got off the train station, I walked quickly in the direction of the park, since the bus stop was only a block away. I walked as fast as I could, but without running, because if that man was behind me, he would know I was running away from him. I turned around praying I wouldn't find him, praying he was just a crazy homeless man waiting for the train. But to my terror, that wasn't the case. Not only was he still behind me, but the man with the sheet over his head had closed the gap.
You're slower than a bedsheet ghost. That's embarrassing. But the one eye is bigger than the other one, and I'm just like imagining a homeless man who found scissors sitting crisscross applesauce at a bus stop, cutting 2 circles into a bedsheet that he found on the floor to go scare some people. That is what I imagined just now.
As soon as my gaze fell on him, the man changed his posture and started running towards me. He was slow but very menacing. Each step he took felt firmer than the last, full of determination and heading towards me. There was no point in pretending I wasn't terrified. I had to run too. I ran as fast as I could towards the bus station. It was my lucky day. The bus usually took a long time, but this time it was coming. I made one last dash and daringly crossed the street until I reached the bus stop. The bus almost ran me over, but it had slowed down and the doors had opened.
Hey, are you crazy? I almost ran over you with the bus!
There's a man chasing me.
Yeah, whatever. Pay the ticket.
I reached into my pocket for my wallet, but it was gone. I checked all my pockets and my backpack. It was gone.
The bedsheet ghost robbed him. That homeless man is skipping away with this man's wallet in his hand. Best day ever. You know what he's gonna do with that money? He's gonna buy more bedsheets and more scissors. So he can continue doing this, because this is his life's mission. He's gonna scare as many people as a bedsheet ghost as possible. This seems like a solid occupation.
Sir, I can't find my wallet. It's an emergency. Could I pass without paying?
Oh, so that's how it goes, is it? Get off my bus now!
Sir, you don't understand. There's
no one out there. Either you're insane or you're doing all this to get out of paying the fare. Whatever it is, get off my bus, now!
I looked around and got off. Normally, I wouldn't have done that, especially in a situation like this, but the man in the sheet didn't seem to be around, and I recognized in this man's eyes that he was furious. As soon as the bus left, I was alone once again, or at least I thought so, because from the street, behind where the bus was, he came out once again, that terrifying man with the sheet on his head. Paralyzed.
He came back because he's like, I like your glasses too. I wonder how far I have to chase him until he throws me with his glasses.
With fear and unable to escape, the man stood next to me, walking slowly towards me. I stood against the wall, and when he came face to face with me, he stretched out his hand, trying to give me something.
Hey, this is your wallet. You dropped it at the train stop.
I was severely wrong. I never admit that, but I was wrong. He's not a bedsheet ghost thief. He just wanted to tell him that he dropped his wallet. I'm not going to lie to you. This is quite embarrassing for me.
I looked down and it was true. That was my wallet. I could see it still had money in it. Was this the reason the man was behind me? Oh, thank you very much. Once I reached out to grab my wallet, the man jumped out and grabbed my arm. With the other hand, he pulled off the sheet and stuck his face to mine. It was horrible. His face was totally deformed. This man was not only homeless, but he had suffered a terrible fire that had taken his face.
Now he just needs some lotion and a toothbrush. That's all he needs, and then he'll be a handsome young man. Maybe a hat too. I can already see it.
It was the only possible explanation. Suddenly, the man put a hand on my side so that I couldn't escape. With the other hand, he grabbed me by the neck and pressed me even more against the wall. Once he was satisfied, he threw me to the side. My only impulse was to run and run in any direction of my house, crying and disgusted by what had just happened. As I ran, I could see the man standing in the same position. He didn't try to chase me. He just stood there, laughing and looking at me. That was the last time I was reckless enough to go back alone at night. And the next day, I asked for a shift change at my job. No more night shift. I still can't explain what happened that night, but on reflection, there really isn't much of an explanation. I was just the victim of a perverse and sadistic man who saw prey in the night. I still remember him laughing in the distance, being satisfied with the—
Why is that man built kind of good though? Like if I was like, that man, I want to look like that. Like if you just cut out like this and this part, you know, it's quite good. I want to get his workout routine. Can he like a run back?
fear he caused me. And I wonder what would have happened if he—
It's even better from the side! Woo!
He had wanted to do more than just scare me, and how helpless I would have been in front of him.
The last video we're going to be watching today is Walking Home Alone Horror Stories by Mort. So let's get straight into it.
This happened to me when I was in 4th grade. I am now 42. The internet as we know it wasn't around back in those days. So unfortunately I don't have any news articles to corroborate my story. But I have a very vivid memory of what happened that day. The day that my friend nearly lost her innocence and possibly her life. Here is the backstory. I have always had this very weird habit that I still do to this very day. I don't know what causes it, but I've always walked on my tiptoes. When I would go to school, I would usually get picked on a lot for this. No matter how much I tried walking flat-footed, I always ended up back on my toes.
I used to walk like that too when I was younger. I would just catch myself walking on my toes, and the kids at school used to start calling me invisible high heels. And I think that's what pushed me to walk flat-footed again. I don't know why I did it. It just kind of happened. Muscle memory.
This led my family to believe that I was destined to be a ballet dancer. As much as I love to dance, I was also a tomboy that preferred climbing trees to wearing dresses. So when my mother, who worked—
She's not like other girls.
worked 2 jobs, took me to the community center and signed me up for ballet classes, I thought I would definitely have to learn how to like dresses. The dance instructor's name was Mulaney. She was impressed by my skills but wasn't crazy about my height or my parents' economic status, as this was a very expensive class. At the end of my audition, I was told that I was too tall and awkward. It was a nice way of building up a young girl's confidence. When I exited the classroom and entered the hallway, I heard Mulaney say under her breath that she would not teach poor kids. I stopped mid-stride and turned around. "Excuse me?" And that's when she replied, "I don't teach trailer trash, okay?" My face became so red that my ears were purple. At that moment, I decided that I would knock her on her pompous ass. Before I could react—
Sorry, I'm waiting for the scary and walking home alone part, and not this entire girl's backstory of how she wanted to be a ballet dancer but she couldn't because she was poor. Wonderful backstory, random girl.
That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder, followed by a man's voice. "That's a fighter in you. Have you ever thought about trying out karate?" Mr. Diaz was a well-known and respected karate instructor in our county. He wanted me to try out his class and even offered to take me in at no charge. I would be his first girl, but he saw my potential, and I still owe him a lot for this. When I first started training, he noticed my tiptoed footing, and rather than mock me for it, he showed me how to turn them into weapons, as my legs are, to this day, still solid muscle from my calves to my thighs, and I kick harder than a mule. It was around this time that our small town on the coast of North Carolina was being terrorized by a man who had been abducting young girls. He would take them, have his way with them, and when he was done, he would bind their hands together, blindfold them before crossing into another town and dropping them off in the middle of the night. He was a sick bastard. He didn't kill any of his victims, but his MO suggested that he was becoming more and more violent with each incident. Mr. Diaz changed his lessons for a week or two and taught us how to use our momentum against attackers to get away. Eyes, nose, groin, and face. He said that if you were attacked, we should try our best to claw and scratch their face and eyes. Not only would this have the chance of blinding them, but it would also make them easy to identify after the fact. More importantly, he emphasized the buddy system. He told us not to scream the R word, because unfortunately, while many people want to stop that from happening, he also said people don't want to see it, and carry that mental image around in their heads. We should scream, "Fire," or "I lost my arm." He said that as silly as the last one sounds, it works. People are compelled to look at a fire, but even more so if someone's arm is falling off. Okay, so now on to the day in question. I was in 4th grade, and the year was 1990, springtime. At the time, I was with my best friend, who we'll call Ginny. Ginny and I decided to take a little walk around the neighborhood we lived in. This neighborhood had 2 main entrances, and formed a circle with 2 parallel streets in the middle. Homes were lined along each road, no more than 1.5 acres apart, some even closer. It was very easy to come into one entrance, leave out the other, and not be seen by anyone, even if you were paying attention to the vehicles that were passing through. This was also back when we kept the time by looking at the streetlights. The rule was when the streetlights come on, your ass better be on your way home. Ginny and I were on the main road heading towards the back. We were just being a couple of young girls talking about boys that we liked and the boogeyman that had been terrorizing our state. A girl that we knew named Kelly had been the latest victim. She was turned from a social butterfly into a psych ward irregular. She even tried to take her own life at one point. As we were talking about this, I remember looking over my shoulder and seeing an unfamiliar car approaching us very slowly. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The car was a Pontiac, with a faded maroon or burgundy color. The driver almost reminded me of Jeffrey Dahmer. He wore these thick, red-rimmed glasses.
I was about to say that, except I would have said he looks like a Jimmy who talks like, "Hi girls, I have some chocolate and Harry Potter books in my back seat." You know, but Jeffrey Dahmer is more fitting, honestly. I don't know where I came from. Was it Jimmy or Timmy? I can't even remember.
Had tight blonde, curly hair, and had a smile that made my skin crawl. His window was down already, and he stopped the car beside us. "Hello, girls. I'm trying to pay my electric bill, and I can't seem to find the office anywhere. Can you tell me how to get there from here?" Coincidentally, the one electric company in our town wasn't even a mile away from our neighborhood. In fact, I could have walked straight through the woods and shown up at the front doorstep. The only way to pay to turn on the service was in the office itself. Again, this was a small town back in the early 90s. The driver continued, saying that he had to get there to avoid his electricity shutting off. Knowing that he had to have been there before, I stated, "It's where you paid to have it turned on, so just go there." That's when I noticed an open map beside him on the passenger seat. He explained that his mother had been the one to turn on the electricity, and he was new to the area and had just come back from deployment. Something that struck me as odd was that his hair was a bit too long for being in the military, and he didn't have a sticker for getting on base. There are 2 military bases by us, Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point. Both of my grandfathers served in the military. Can you please just show me it here on the map? He beckoned Jenny over to his car. Jenny was obviously unaware that something was off. I looked around and saw that no one was outside, and I quickly turned my attention back to Jenny and the man. The voice of Mr. Diaz echoed in my head. Fight if you can't fly. Something bad will happen to Jenny if you don't. As soon as Jenny gets close enough, a look of pure evil forms on the man's face. Imagine seeing a human transforming into a demonic creature. That's the best way I can describe it. Thanks, sweetie. Just point it out for me right here. He locks eyes with mine and gives me a sickly smile. That's when I quickly grab Jenny. Wait! Don't lean in! Jenny's scream echoed across the street, as I look up and saw that the man had reached over the passenger seat and had a hold of her arm. The car slowly began to roll forward as he struggled to pull her in. I yelled as I wrapped my arms around Jenny's upper body. I then pulled back as hard as I could, and I knew it was going to hurt like a bitch once I fell onto the asphalt, but that was okay, as long as I still had a hold of Jenny. We both hit the road, and it hurt like hell.
Why is nobody in their houses reacting? If it's such a small neighborhood, then wouldn't a girl screaming her lungs out attract at least someone? Anybody. Even old man Jenkins across the street. I know he's a little bit deaf in the one ear, but you know he can hear pretty well. Surprisingly.
As I predicted. By this time, some of the neighbors heard us screaming.
Never
and
mind.
had exited their homes. I pulled Jenny to safety as the car peeled away. One of the bystanders was the mother of my friend Brandon. She got the tags and a detailed description of what the driver looked like and his car. The man that we encountered that day was the monster who had been preying on young girls in North Carolina. I don't recall his name. My mother made every effort to keep me sheltered before this incident, and it just got worse after this. Now that I'm a mother myself, I can understand better now. She was proud of me and my actions that day. Jenny was also very grateful, and I'm glad to say that she's still doing well. The girl that I mentioned earlier, Kelly, serves as an example of what could have become of her if I hadn't intervened that day. Kelly has had a rough life and doesn't really speak to anyone anymore. I don't know all the details, but the monster ended up being caged. The descriptions of the car and the driver gathered from my neighborhood aided in his apprehension. I often think back to that day at the community center, where I was scoffed at by someone who thought I wasn't worth the investment. But against all odds, Mr. Diaz saw the potential in a tall, awkward girl who walked on her tiptoes. He was the guiding voice in my head that day, and if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to save Jenny.
If you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more types of videos like this, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, it's free and you can always change your mind later, and I will see you next time. Bye!